It's upon us, man. Well, school's back in session.
I'm so glad we made it. And school's back. A lot has changed since we've been on
I feel like when I was in school, I didn't go back to school until like end of August, early September.
Oh, we were always Labor Day in New Jersey. Yeah, when I was a kid.
Like if you're getting homework assignments on August 11th, August 12th, I mean, that's tough.
That's really brutal. But they're going to be out before Memorial Day this year.
Which is if you had to pick, would you rather start school earlier and end earlier, or start school later and end later?
Start school earlier and end later.
You would rather start school earlier?
Earlier.
I mean, I feel like I'm already in kind of the slog and in the grind of it. I'd rather end later because you're not going to be ending like early July. I mean, you're ending June 5th, right?
I'm a proponent.
And that gives you like a little bit more time. Once you're in that summer groove, it's tough to just get out.
I'm a proponent of year-round
and
school.
It's hot. I mean, you're sitting in a classroom and it's like August 15th, August 20th, and you're looking out the window. It's steamy. Right. I mean, you're just like, what? And it's 1 p.m. You're tired. You've been up at like 7. I'm like, what am I doing here, man?
I think, though, we end summer vacation and place it out through the year. You know, John's school, Jackson Keller did it. Within Northeast District, they had year-round school. And so it would be like a couple of weeks here and there throughout the year, maybe about 4 weeks for Christmas break.
I can't do that.
I like that.
I'm out on that. Well, yeah, now that school is back, high school football starting back up. College football kicks off in 2 weeks.
And pro football,
New York Giants that's right.
Looking good.
So it's going to be,
I will say that.
It's going to be busy on the weekends. You and I were laughing about this last night. I saw this this social media, like one of those viral posts kind of on social media.
This is so good.
This is hilarious. We were talking about this last night. But obviously, like the weekends are numbered for, date nights for couples. If you're dating somebody who's like a hardcore football fan, I mean, because people are shocked. You got high school Friday night, college games from
all
like
day
11 a.m. to
West
11
Coast
p.m.
games until
if
12.
You're throwing down on Hawaii, then you're maybe 1 a.m. and then
he's into fantasy football,
That's
so you can't talk to him.
He's got to set his lineup right. So the date night's good stuff. John, see if you can pull this up. This was this dude right here. This picture was going around. The Jonas Brothers were playing a concert at MetLife in New Jersey. And that's the Daniel Jones jersey, your boy.
Yeah, he was a 6-year starter for the Giants. Never really got.
We thought he
up
was the
and
answer
going.
after like 3 years.
I was worried coming out of
Nobody
Duke
really
University.
did.
I'm like, when's the last time a good QB came from
Picked
Duke?
in the top 10. But this dude, I mean, Jones, now he's no longer on the team. Now he's with the Colts. But here's this boyfriend right here who's like, I'm picturing the girlfriend asking the guy like, hey, do you want to go to the Jonas? But he's like, when is it? Before. Absolutely.
August what?
August what?
Sure.
I would love to.
I'll drive. Let's go.
Do you want to go to dinner beforehand?
First?
Let's do it. You hungry?
So he changed the E in Jones to an A.
It's innovation.
This kid, he's got some craft acumen,
he's
right?
The boyfriend
maybe he's got
of
a
the year
cricket at the house. Look at that.
This guy right here.
So now it's a Jonas jersey.
Yeah, but like in 3 weeks, if she would ask him, do you want to go to the Jonas Brothers concert? The answer's probably going to be no.
I wonder too, like were people
also the guy's probably over the age of 25 and he's wearing an NFL jersey, so that just gives you an idea of how locked in he is.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Like if you're a grown male and you're wearing a jersey of another player, that means
I'm wondering how many people said, do you think Nick Jonas played for the Giants?
No, is that
really a jersey?
He's got some serious brownie points to work with here on the team.
I'll tell you, our guest on Raining Threes today
it's a great one.
Could literally be a tight end for the New York Giants.
Dude,
My man is swole.
He's
jacked,
big. Dude.
Yes, for real.
And he's like 6'3". I mean, what was
6'2"?
in that neighborhood?
Ladies and gentlemen, County Commissioner Tommy Calvert.
Come on, Tommy Calvert in the house.
I'm ready to touch down, fellas. I'm ready to go.
Right?
My dad was a tight end, actually. I come from a long line of football players, except I went to a private school, and it used to be an all-girls school, so they didn't have football, so I didn't get a chance. I played lacrosse. I was one of the first, on a Texas lacrosse team back in the 90s. No, that's from where you're from. That's
real big.
And maybe a little bit in Chicago. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they got going across. Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I was a family failure when it came to football because I had a uncle who played in the Canadian Football League. They called him Freight Train. My Uncle Sonny. Yeah. He was a big guy and. Oh, there's lots of stories. Anyway, it's great to be on with you guys.
Thanks for coming on, Tommy.
It's an honor.
Great
Thank
to
you
see
for inviting me.
And Tommy, you went to. He told me I'd call him Tommy too because I called him Commissioner. But we've already cleared the runway on that. You went to Tufts University in Boston. A trivia question for you: Do you know the Tufts team name?
The Tufts.
Mascot.
You don't know it. It's one of the Division III schools have some epic team names. This is
I will give you a hint.
Okay.
P.T. Barnum was one of our founders, and one of his gifts to the school gave birth to this mascot name.
One of his gifts. The Tufts. No.
You're in the ballpark.
You're going in the right direction.
Really?
Yeah. So we're the Jumbos.
Jumbos.
Yeah. So Jumbo was the third largest elephant ever recorded, and so that was, and so we had the bones and a statue of Jumbo on the campus. It burnt in a fire. We replaced it with another sculpture, but. Yeah, we were the Jumbos, so I am a Jumbo.
Wild. And I love how you chose Tufts. We were just talking about this. It was weather related, wasn't it?
Yeah, in part. So it's two things. One, my dad had a congresswoman in town my dad used to organize about 30 neighborhood and community groups. And so he had a Unsung Heroes Award to recognize everybody who'd done community service throughout the year. They were unsung heroes. And so this congresswoman came in, and she happened to have a committee assignment that was what I ended up majoring in. She was on the House International Relations Committee, and she asked me, what schools are you applying to? And because I told her I was interested in international relations. And I said, Emory and Georgetown and, Dartmouth and blah, 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 blah. She goes, well, you should apply to Tufts. And I said, I thought Tufts was an all-women's school. And the reason is, whenever I went into Mrs. Johnson's office as the college counselor, there was a brochure, and it was like a targeted towards women. So it was only women in the brochure. So I flipped through it, and I just saw women.
That makes sense.
Nobody knows about Tufts in San Antonio, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's known on the East Coast, it's known on the West Coast, but it's not known really in the South. And so it was always known for international relations studies. It was, Georgetown and Tufts battled it out for 1 and 2 programs, but I thought it was an all-women's school. So I asked Congresswoman McKinney, I said, well, how long has the school been co-ed? She goes, well, ever since 1850 something, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And so, looking at the weather-related part is looking at the brochures, I saw this picture of Dartmouth having the snow literally above the roof. And I said, I'm not going there. I got in, but I am not going there.
Yeah.
And Boston isn't far away, but a little less frigid and snowy.
A little less, but that nor'easters will get you there.
Oh, man.
I mean, they'll get you.
I was a dumb college kid at times where, you would go out in a sweater, things you would never do, now. But you had to go in mentally tough. Coming from Texas, we don't have anything to compare it to, right? So you get all your jackets, you learn the layer process.
Yes.
And you just tough it out. So I went through 8 Boston winters, lived there for 8 years.
And your love for international, you wanted to find a place where you could really hone in on international relations.
Yeah.
Where did your love of international relations, where did that fire first spark?
So it was in school. I was blessed to go to St. Mary's Hall, and we had a class called Model United Nations, right?
Yeah, the Model UN.
Right. And so I was a top delegate. I won top delegate in Texas twice, and I was ranked in the top 50 debaters in North America at Georgetown and the national, well, actually it was North American contest. So we had people from Canada. I remember Chelsea Clinton was at some of these things.
Wow.
'Cause I'm about her age. I don't remember who's younger or older. It might be exactly the same age. And so I was very interested in helping. I love global cultures. I love all different types of cultures. And I never really thought I would use my degree completely. I always thought I would be in policy of some sort. But I was able to, go to Tufts. I think I was a freshman. I was walking up a hill at Tufts, and I saw this flyer, and it said, "Come hear a former slave speak." And I was like, what?
Whoa.
This person like 200 years old?
I was going to say, how is that even possible?
So, as you may remember, in the south of Sudan, the dictatorship had declared a jihad against the blacks living on oil-rich land, and they were misquoting scriptures in the Quran which say that when you're in a jihad, you can enslave your enemies. And so those folks in South Sudan were actual victims of chattel slavery, just like we had in the United States,
same. Okay.
Bought and sold and handed down as property from the next generation. You could, this was 99 or so, you could literally buy a person for less than a cow or less than $50, right?
Wow.
And so I saw the head of this group, Dr. Charles Jacobs, and he was kind of like Doc in Back to the Future. He had this wily essence. He was brilliant, but he was unorganized. And I grew up, as I mentioned before, with a father who organized neighborhood and community movements, right? And I said, I think I can help this guy organize this thing. He needs my help. So I go up to him afterwards and said, I'd like to help you. I live in San Antonio, and I'm going to come back next year, and and this was so... this is so much hubris as a freshman saying this. I said, I'm going to run to be on the board of trustees of Tufts University. And so this is I'll tell you, this is an interesting story. So at that time, there was a big divestment campaign, which is where you take stock and you divest from companies that are aiding and abetting human rights abuses, right? Like in the 80s, South Africa and the apartheid, that was a big conversation. And so there were universities here in the United States that said, we will not invest in any company that's invested in the apartheid government in South Africa, right? And so in that era, in the late 90s, the nation's largest teachers' pension fund, TIAA-CREF, was a target of the American Anti-Slavery Group because Human Rights Watch, our State Department, had noted that that some of the oil companies that were in the teachers fund were aiding and abetting the slave raids. The dictatorship was allowed to launch helicopters. They had these barrel bombs that would just have shrapnel that would kill everybody. And so I started studying this stuff after I heard this presentation. But I mean, I'd really only heard one presentation. Well, the local Fox 29 actually decided to do a story, and they called the American Anti-Slavery Group in Boston. They said, hey, we want to do a story about this. Do you have anybody who is in San Antonio? And they go, yeah, we just met this guy, Tommy Calvert. And, this is like Michael Valdez and all those guys back in the day. And they said, oh, we know Tommy. Yeah. So they called me and they asked me to do the interview, and I told them no. I said, I can't. I mean, I just sat in the audience one time. I'm no expert on the subject. I don't feel comfortable doing it. So I turned them down about twice, and finally they called back and said, look, we will give you a cram study of the issue, and we really appreciate if you do this interview. So I did it, and at that time, I remember saying, fax me what you got. We weren't even doing emails back then. It was fax, kind of stuff. They faxed me some stuff, and the interview ended up going on Fox all over the United States. I don't know what I said. I don't think I've seen the interview since. And I began.
You were speaking on behalf of
the American Anti-Slavery Group in Boston, and the issue of slavery in Sudan and the persecuted Christians and genocide. I was at that time. That was the summer of 1999, so I was 18 years old.
How about that? Wow.
And so I began to organize students and teachers around Massachusetts, actually, the entire state of Massachusetts. I ended up being the youngest person ever appointed to the Board of Trustees. I ended up winning a seat on the Board of Trustees as a sophomore. The committee I got assigned to was the Administration and Finance Committee, which oversaw the university's pension. Now, watch this. My university president, Dr. John DiBiagio, he was president of the Association of College and University Presidents, which meant he had a lot of sway with the nation's largest teachers' pension fund. But even more, he was the former president of the University of Michigan. And the University of Michigan was the first college in the 80s to drop stock invested in South Africa.
No way.
So Dr. Jacobs, the stars all align.
Yeah, they really did.
And I go in and I negotiate with Dr. DiBiagio, and he tells me, well, I know Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs is the CEO of this pension fund. Great name for a Wall Street pension fund. Mr.
Right?
Biggs, right? He said, what do you want me to tell Mr. Biggs? I said, I want you to tell him to drop the stock because the liability is going to end up coming back on the company at some point. This is State Department documentation, all this stuff. Well, he did. The stock was dropped. It made ABC. I was on ABC, all Canadian National Post. I was on, the 60 Minutes of South Africa. All of these news stations covered this divestment when the stars aligned. So Tufts changed my life. The point I'm saying is it was definitely meant to be that I would learn about this issue and work to try to help people.
By taking that walk up the hill, you know what I'm saying? And
staring at a flyer.
Staring at a flyer.
In many ways, representing such a secular and such a long-standing issue and topic as an 18-year-old. I mean, from what it sounds like, was your first foray into the public service sphere.
Yeah, in that landscape.
Well, not really. I didn't have much of a childhood because my dad was always taking me to neighborhood meetings.
Okay.
I mean,
What did your father do?
so a lot of things. He's a Renaissance man. So my dad was an urban planner. He worked for the East Side Economic Development Council. And also growing up, he ended up being the vice president of a medical supply company, but he was also in the entertainment and concert business. So he was one of the largest concert promoters in town.
Wow.
And he was a civil rights leader, right? So my dad was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Commission and the Black Panther. You know, he was a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he took me to all of these fights down at City Hall to get drainage where people died, kids died on the way to school, to get medical centers where we didn't have them, to get banks to invest where they never came to the East Side. So when I ran for commissioner, we were able to document prior to ever serving in office that as a young person in San Antonio, I was able to help get $432 million in infrastructure. And that's how, in part, I became the youngest county commissioner and the first African-American county commissioner. Because people say, well, Tommy's always the guy who goes down and helps us get stuff done.
It's gotta be Tommy.
You know, that's how they elevated, you know, because I do think if you're going to enter service, you've got to serve, right? You can't lead people until you serve people.
There you
and
go.
so, you know, I think our best electeds, not that I'm saying that's me, but they have been people who have been in the trenches in the neighborhoods and doing things with you.
Did a servant heart come from Dad?
Well, yeah, Mom and Dad, and you know, my grandmother was involved in the Beacon Hill Neighborhood Guild as well. I found that out when I ran. The first Latina councilwoman, Maria Berriozabal, sat me down at the gyms on Hildebrand, and she goes, "You know, I'm going to endorse you, right?" And I'm like, "No, thank you." And she goes, "Well, I know what stock you come from," and I thought she was talking about my dad.
Yeah.
She goes, "You know, I knew your grandmother Pearl," and I said, "No." She goes, "Yeah, your grandma was in the Beacon Hill Neighborhood Guild with me. I was the president, and I would say, we're going to do ABC, and your grandmother would go, 'No, Maria, we're going to do 1, 2, 3.'" And she said, "Your grandma always won the votes." And she said she was always right about them. And so my grandmother helped in the neighborhood, and my whole family has just tried to help where we can. My mother does an amazing job at San Antonio College running the largest departments over there. My stepfather, Reverend Hector Grant, has been a Methodist minister in the city. So, you know, I've been blessed to be part of a family who believed in helping, not just my dad, but my whole family. We're all in.
You grew up in San Antonio, born and raised here in San Antonio?
Yeah.
And then
East Side, right by where you start the Martin Luther King March, right at the top of Freedom Bridge, little pink house on MLK. Yeah.
And then went to Boston for school.
Big change.
And then after Tufts, did you travel around and live a couple different places, or was it immediately back to San Antonio?
So I was fortunate at Tufts I was a highly subsidized college student. I couldn't afford, I mean, it was the 8th most expensive college in the United States. So they gave me 2 scholarships in science and humanities to study the building of the European Union, civil engineering, global health and the environment in France. So I got a chance to live in probably one of the most beautiful places on earth is a place called Talois, France, which is where you get Evian water.
Okay.
And it's this, so you see, you know, the peak on your bottle, right? And at the bottom of the lake is Lake Annecy. That's where I lived. And you had these trees that had flowers that were like clouds. And it's 75 degrees and you're walking by the lake and you see the Evian peak and you're like, there's clouds floating. This is like heavenly. It was a beautiful place. Later on in my life, I would travel to places like, you know, Sudan in the war zone. Was not a nice, total polar opposite, right?
From that? Oh, yeah.
Sudan was like the images you see of Ethiopia with the cracked earth, right? Like I was literally working in 120-degree heat. We had no roads. We chartered airplanes. We camped out in tents. I brought my own food. I purified my own water. I was guarded by the rebel army, the Southern People's Liberation Army. They were in the middle of the bloodiest civil war in the 20th century. We had to fly low to avoid.
While you were there.
That's how I rolled, right?
How long were you there?
I would be there about 2 weeks at a time.
Wow.
How old were you when you?
Well, the first time I went, I was 21.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And when I became head of the organization, after that first trip, There were only about 3 of us who were like in that age range who went. I didn't realize really what I was going into. And I canceled when I became head of the organization, I canceled the ability for young, because I thought if any young person ever would die on my watch, I would feel, pretty bad. Right. But yeah, I had a chance to work there, did some covert work along the Thai-Burma border, documenting forced labor, sex trafficking, help, put some stuff into legislation. I had a chance to live in India. The Rotary Foundation sent me there to study business. And but I've traveled in many countries. Yeah.
You just mentioned legislation, and I've got to dip into this. You were part of some serious sex trafficking legislation that a lot of people are hearing about right now.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
In the news. So I helped write the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2003. And I, as head of the American Anti-Slavery Group, which was the largest anti-trafficking organization in the United States at that time.
At that time? Is that right?
That's correct. We were the first anti-trafficking organization founded since Reconstruction. So we were founded around like 92-ish.
And a lot of us out here didn't even know it was happening in 03, bro.
No.
A lot of people, are unaware of how much it's happening now.
When I started heading that organization in 2002, there were literally only about 10 organizations in the whole United States dealing with trafficking.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow.
And so I helped write the 20-year mandatory minimum that Ghislaine Maxwell is serving under right now.
Wow.
And I'm very proud of that. We worked with Congress. I remember Senator Baucus. He wanted to do a fundraiser for my organization because we pioneered email activism. So now we're all used to like how, you can click and send a letter to your congressperson, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, that was totally new. And so we seemed a lot bigger than we were. We were organizing, I was on the road. I used to speak about 2 weeks out of the month on the road, coast to coast, about the issue of human trafficking. And we would get databases and emails, and we would, make that list work for us, so we could push legislation. So I'm very proud of that.
So awesome.
It was interesting. Like I'm following the news, and then it hit me. I'm like, oh, I wrote the law she was sentenced on, right? So yeah.
And why isn't it something that a lot of people don't know a lot about? Like you'll see a movie, Sound of Freedom, and Taken, and some of these these moments. Mm-hmm. But then on a day-to-day, I don't think people are aware.
We were all taught that slavery ended in 1865.
Yeah.
So that frame, first of all, is part of kind of like the re-education that we have to do, right? But those of us who are involved in the modern day abolitionist movement understand there's more human trafficking and slavery than there ever was, unfortunately. When I was involved on a day-to-day basis in the movement, 27 million people were enslaved around the world. We're talking about chattel slavery like in Sudan. We're talking about sex trafficking, which we have from coast to coast here and around the world. We're talking about debt bondage in places like India, Bangladesh, and Nepal, where let's say you're a brick maker and the brick factory owner says, come, Tommy, move your family to work, make bricks for me, and we'll pay you. And at the end of the month, I find out he charges me rent. And the rent has a 60% interest rate on it. He charges me food, 60% interest. I can never pay that debt back. So I'm in debt bondage. And what happens is 2 and 3 generations of people work for that family, not just me. It will be my kids will work for them. So yeah, I was involved in trying to educate. And I think we do have a lot more. It makes me really proud to see other leaders take this issue on. It's difficult sometimes when I'm in San Antonio because I used to do, kind of undercover human trafficking. I helped set up, for example, the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force, the LA Human Trafficking Task Force. The city of LA was a client of mine. I worked with NYPD. I worked with, Boston PD to set up the early human trafficking task force. And I worked on behalf of the U.S. government to implant the issue into popular TV and movies. So my PR company, when I left the American Anti-Slavery Group, I was hired by the Department of Health and Human Services to actually educate the writers and producers in New York and L.A. And so I worked at a 20th Century Fox in Beverly Hills, and I worked at a Lifetime in New York, and I taught at the film school at USC and NYU, and was a technical advisor to shows like CSI Miami and Law and Order.
To get that right when they did it, yeah. Wow.
Bingo.
They want to get it as accurately as possible, right? It's just like for like a war movie, you know, talking to veterans and people who've served, right?
Yeah, and so they would call. I worked with the Entertainment Industries Council, who was a group that implanted seatbelts back in the 80s or 70s with Archie Bunker, I think, and we worked with the Entertainment Industries Council. So if I didn't know how a Polish trafficking victim exactly would look, I would call my friend Dr. Donna, you know, at the University or whatever, who is a Polish trafficking expert. And I would say, you know, okay, she's the expert, talk to her, things like that. Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a problem is human and sex trafficking in San Antonio, Texas?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's the fastest growing source of revenue for organized crime and terrorist networks. And that's why the United States government wanted me to help plant that issue into popular TV so more Americans would be able to recognize it. It flourishes wherever there's poverty, right? So you have billions of people living on a couple dollars a day, and they're most likely to be exploited into these circumstances. So because we're one of the biggest cities with the highest per capita poverty in the United States, it's a huge issue for exploitation of
And it just seems our proximity to the border. We've got interstates here to go coast to coast, border to border, right? So
exactly.
I mean, it's just
we're
a
cross-section for that.
Cross-section for that.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so Tommy, what does the future look like for you? I mean, we were talking. I mean, we're sitting with someone who could arguably go all the way and be in the Oval Office. I'm not even kidding.
Thank you.
I literally said it to Bill about 20 minutes before he walked in.
Thank you.
Just because I love your secular background, right? Where you've traveled so many. I'm a big proponent of. It's such a big world out there. I think if more people just kind of knocked on the door of their neighbor and just their state neighbor, their country neighbor, like you can learn so much from talking to new people, and you have done that, Tommy.
You've literally done that.
Well, I'm honored. I will say this: it was not on my plan to be an abolitionist. It was not on my plan to start a radio station. It wasn't on my plan to run for county commissioner. So at this point, I've stopped over planning. Okay, because for me, I just I don't wear it on my sleeve, but I say God's plan is better than my plan was. Amen. Right, and so I go where I feel I'm needed, and I don't know where that will be. But obviously, I'm looking at how the country has been, how things are going, and I feel that. My constituents have sent me time and time again to serve them because I've done a good job. I know I would give it my all, no matter what it was, right? So, like I said, my plan, I've stopped in many ways, and I will think about where I'm supposed to be and go there.
I know that discernment on that's got to be such a challenge because someone like you with this acumen, this resume, people are knocking down your door. I guarantee it.
Well, so. I'll tell you, I get emotional about the story. I'm not going to do it right now because it's a true story. But I was not going to run for commissioner. I was trying to recruit someone else. Commissioner Tommy Atkinson decided to run for county judge, and I had helped him with his door-to-door campaigns for several campaigns. And I was trying to recruit other people because this is not on the bio, but I had a $9 million television show on MSNBC called Slave Hunter. And I really felt we were going to win an Emmy. It was a human trafficking television show, and we captured things I've never seen to this day on television in that show. It was an undercover news investigative program. And I had to pinch myself, guys. I was working at a 30 Rock. I'm a kid from off of MLK. What the hell am I doing at 30 Rock?
Right.
It was crazy, right? And so it was 2013. I was called to be the chair of the board of this nonprofit that had this contract with Peacock Productions and NBC. And I was people were saying, you got to run for this office. And I thought, I should run because I think it's important to put the people ahead of the powerful. It's important to have someone who truly represents people, right? And so we had a lawsuit. It was a bogus lawsuit filed against the show. And we were going to be the Thanksgiving weekend special for MSNBC. And this lawsuit comes, and I'm like, my program director calls me and said, we got a lawsuit. I'm like, who the hell would file a lawsuit against someone helping folks out of trafficking?
Really,
what the hell's going on? Anyway, I won't tell you the details, but the the president of NBC was under a lot of stress because he was in his first year. And there were other lawsuits. There was a big class action over a Mount Everest reality show where people died on Mount Everest, and there was another one in ours. And I think they were very cautious about resuming the filming of the show. So I met with the senior VPs and as a chair of the board of the nonprofit who had the contract, and I told them this is frivolous. It's not going to amount to anything. So the filing deadline was December 9th of 2013. I think I had that meeting like the 3rd or 4th of December, something like that. And I remember the morning at 8 a.m. on December 5th, I prayed at my radio station. I said, God, if you want me to run for this position, you're going to have to move the filming of this show past the March Democratic primary. This is a true story. At 1 o'clock, my assistant, Dawn, in New York, called. She goes, congratulations, Tommy. The execs at NBC have decided to resume the filming. I go, when? She goes, they're not exactly sure, but sometime past March. And I got goosebumps. I looked up and said, God, I didn't want you to tell me that. Because I'd run for Congress as an independent when I was 25, 26 years old. And it really turned me off from the process of politics. It really did. I was used to being, a debate champion, winning the state debate championship, merit, doing things. And in politics, the most meritorious person does not always win. Right. And I learned, I was 25, 26, and I said, I'll never do this crap again, right? So, and I had at the time, I had, lent the campaign. I was 25, 26. I was making pretty good money. I lent the campaign $25,000, and, I had to restart my business. And so I just, I was done with politics. So I prayed and asked God for a sign because I really needed it. Because I was not going to do it if he didn't give me a sign. And that was the sign. And that's why I decided to run.
Wow.
That's my story.
That's
awesome.
why when you talk about you go where you feel you're needed, right?
Yeah, I've learned I can I can get some answers.
So I was gonna ask, why did you feel you were needed after being in so many different roles and so many different places? Why did you feel you were needed back home?
Well, I'm in my 10th year of being in service as an elected official in Bexar County, and I'm in a very reflective time. And I can look back at it, and I know that there are a lot of electeds who don't really know how to do these jobs. I'll just be straight about it. They don't understand the power that they can do to make things happen. And so I've had to keep, 75-year-old, senior citizens from being evicted and, help them get the, housing. And even on, these battles that we're fighting, over priorities, over public spending, I have been, a voice to champion the needs of the community, right? In an era of largesse of political campaign contributions, and where, some of the people we magnify as heroes in our community are actually really putting the chorizo to a lot of people. There's a lot of vultures that are, preying on those who are vulnerable and weak. And I've often been the only guy to get in the way. It didn't always make headlines. I was supposed to be here to protect a lot of vulnerable people. And so, and we've elevated San Antonio's, game as well. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that, I was a young professional when I came back, and I said, man, we're 30 years behind revitalizing our inner city, getting a lot of the amenities in our downtown. And so I worked really hard to be a bootleg realtor and bootleg developer downtown. Mm-hmm. And the whole conversation over, the Spurs wanting to come downtown, that was my work. I mean, it was both my work and Julian Castro's work, and working with the business community to say, yeah, you should build a density of places that young people want to live in your core, and other people want to live. And welcome to my precinct.
Exactly.
I live down there. I'm a Southtown resident.
Yeah.
These are conversations we may have had while putting makeup on. It's all right.
And so, I used to joke, I'll be too old to enjoy how hip we're about to become, but I still like to have a good time. And but it's been gratifying to give back to where I'm from, But I will say that the equity battle and the poverty battle, those are boulders I've been pushing up the hill with not as much success as I would like. And I don't think, we're far. I mean, I helped create the housing bond, which is, a lack of education and a lack of wealth are the two Achilles heels of San Antonio, right? And so I've been able to move the conversation in a different direction. And sometimes I'm the lone voice, and but I know the people are with me. I do know that, and I'm very grateful for that.
Our mayor said earlier this week, Mayor Ortiz-Jones, she wants to put Project Marvel. Obviously, she from what I discerned from it, she wants to put Project Marvel on the back burner because she wants to shine a brighter light on poverty in downtown San Antonio and fixing the issue of poverty. And this is something that you've championed for your entire career, right? Is helping people and raising up poverty more into that microscope. But at the same time, also balancing that with revitalizing the downtown community, welcoming the Spurs in a potential entertainment district to downtown. Is there a notion of, I feel like poverty will always be, I feel like it comes with being a big city, because you look at big cities across the United States, there's always going to be some form of poverty. Absolutely. Poverty is always going to be an issue,
sure,
right? But using that, I feel like they're two separate.
Well, let me chime in.
Was that a good move yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, take the floor there, Commissioner.
Yeah, so a lot to say here. Look, I think that we're going to learn some lessons about process and good public policy. The rollout has not been smooth, to be honest, right? Public policy makers are supposed to use the best data we can. I think the mayor is right to say we do need an independent economic analysis, right? But the economic, because, it's not just looking at how much does a Spurs arena produce for you economically. It's also looking at what do you trade off if you do infrastructure versus an arena, or whether, I'm talking about roads and drainage. Or what happens if you invest that in education or housing or any number of things. You've got to actually look at that. And from that data point, you want your electeds to make a decision that's best for the community. And best for the community might mean we shave down the number a little bit because, frankly, the Spurs have offered $1 billion in investment, right?
Yeah.
Half of that is real estate, and half of that is an arena. So maybe there's a compromise if you have some data that says, well, maybe we don't give you quite as much because you got the bills, you got some money to be able to do a little bit more,
right?
And you can have a give and take because you've made a conscientious decision to say that the maybe housing investment, in the case of the poverty, is the number one way people build wealth, right? The number one way is home ownership, to be honest with you, and passing it down, right? And so we are a community that is, had a lack of wealth building, or it's the education. Now, we know that these dollars are dollars that have a limitation in how you can spend it. But I believe we could probably be more creative. And let me be specific. You could have like a parking garage with housing on top. Potentially, right? Like you can, and that housing could be affordable, not just the highest market rate, right? And I think that you are entering into a potential recession right now where the timing may not exactly be in the best appetite of, as people are struggling with food prices and housing prices. And you may want that flexibility to say, look, I think politically what's best for you is maybe not so much the city pay for that. Maybe we pay for a little less and include on your ballot like $250 million or whatever for people to have a place to live. And you might get it passed because that's also on the ballot, right? You find some balance. So my part of my role in public policy is as a bridge builder, one, to create understanding and to create some healing. And I think it's a very tight, the polling data indicates this is very divided. It may be even a little underwater, depending on the margin of error of the poll. And if you can put a package together that there's a chicken in every pot where everyone feels like someone gets a little piece of the pie, you'll have a much better better public discourse on the issue. So that's how I would answer your question. Yeah.
Tommy Calvert, I wish we had more time. This is such good stuff.
I talk too damn much.
No, it's good. I'm so glad we have you.
Thank you for
That's what
having
you're
me.
here for. Exactly.
Yeah, and this is great for the community, man. We're going to get you back out here.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Tommy Calvert, County Commissioner. We are blessed to have you.
And anytime you need me to come in and substitute on weather or sports, I'll be happy to come on by.
How about Friday night in a couple weeks? It's going to get a little late for me with the
Well, you got a date night?
No, I don't. I work at local TV. It's tough for me. We just talked about that.